J.R.R. Tolkien's masterpiece, The Fellowship of the Ring. There's a moment when Frodo is saying, man, I really wish this had not happened to me. And he was in a situation that was not of his own choosing, that was not of his own design, and that was definitely not of his liking. And he's talking about, like, I really wish this had not happened to me. And Gandalf says this amazing thing, and he says, so do all who live to see such times. But that's not for them to decide. What is up to you is to decide what to do with the time that you have been given. I feel like that we are in one of these times right now. 2020 is not necessarily a year that any of us would have scripted or would have thought, this is what I want my year to look like. With the situations that have come up, with the things that have come up in our own hearts, with the way that we're trying to interact with the world around us, with the way that we're trying to understand things. I think we're being faced with something that none of us would have chosen, but that's not up to us. What is up to us right now is to decide what to do with the time that we have been given. And I feel like this is such an incredible opportunity for people who follow Jesus to be the light of the world and to really make a difference in the world around them. And we have to be careful that we don't get swept up into the way that the world is dealing with what is going on in the world. That we don't become like our society around us and how we process our frustration, our disappointment, our anger, and our grief. But that we process those things with the power of the Spirit and through the filter of the Scriptures, so that we can actually go out and help to bring about change, not only in our own lives, not only in our own homes or our own church, but in our community around us. I believe that the church worldwide, that the Big C church, has an incredible opportunity right now to make some amazing steps forward in the way that people view God and the way that people view Jesus. And it is up to us to be a part of that. It's up to the Turning Point Church to decide if we are going to be a part of that. And I believe that we absolutely can. You know, we don't get to decide the times that we are in, but we do get to decide what we're going to do with those times. Last week, Kevin started us in a new series called The Love You Give. And he really challenged us to think about what level of love we are willing to give to the people around us. And how easy is it to give love when you are not necessarily feeling loving? Or how easy is it to give love to somebody who does not necessarily agree with you, or someone who is just completely offensive to you? Are you able to still give love in that situation? Love is such a higher call, to be able to love the way that Jesus did. A new command I give you, Jesus said, love one another as I have loved you. By this all men will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. He's washing his disciples' feet. He is taking the posture and the position of a servant so that he can love his disciples and love the people that were with him. And he's saying, I'm going to lay down my life for you. And this is how you are to love one another, is to lay down your life for one another. And I mean, that's one of those things that we understand that phrase, but then it comes down to laying down our opinions, or laying down our need to be right, or laying down our need to be heard. Are we able to do that out of love for one another? Man, that is a high call, and it is something that God is calling us to. But it's also exciting to think about what the church will look like on the other side of this. What the church will look like in a few more months, a year from now, 5 years from now, as we look back and we can see the moments where we chose to lean in and choose love. We see the moments where we chose to become like Jesus in laying down our lives for one another and standing up for the truth of God, even over our own opinions in the moment, and letting everything we do come through the filter of the Scriptures and through the story of God. I mean, think about what that will be like in a few years' time, to look back and see the growth in our church because of the choices that we're making right now. And that's why we're talking about this series right now, The Love You Give. We're trying to really lean into this and become more loving like Jesus was. You know, back at the beginning of the year, I don't know if you guys remember this, but we started talking about these things like who our members are, who is a member of the Turning Point. We were talking about that we want our members to be able to love one another, to be a part of a community group. I mean, obviously it's kind of a given. We're starting with that we are going to love God. That is the greatest commandment. Love God with our heart, mind, soul, and strength. But then to be able to love one another. And that was one of the main things that we talked about doing. And so we're looking at like what does that look like now that we're in this new reality? We're in this pandemic situation that does not look like it's changing anytime soon. We're not just in crisis mode until we can get back to Panorama High School. This may be how we are for a while. So if that is true, if this is what church is like for right now, then what does love look like in this context? You know, we also talked about learning how to serve, and so many of you in the Turning Point were amazing volunteers. We had over 100 people every Sunday morning that volunteered to help make our services run. From teaching in Kids Point to getting there early to set up, to be a greeter, to be an usher, to be on the sound crew. We had an amazing sound crew, amazing setup crew. Our Tech Arts team is incredible. Our worship team was amazing. So many people were always serving to help make the church run. Now, we don't have those opportunities to be able to volunteer to help make our Sunday services run. So the question even for you today is, how are you serving to help make the Turning Point Church run? And so you kind of have to change your perspective a little bit and change your vision so that you're thinking about the church. The church is now like the church that you see and that you're a part of. It's your community group. It's the people that you talk to on Zoom when this service is over. It's the people that you connect with during the week. It's the people in your circle. Are you serving those people? It's really easy, you know, in this pandemic time, we all just kind of kick back. I mean, we hardly leave our houses very much. You know, I mean, a lot of people are home all the time. So you're staying home. You're not going out to see people. You're not there anymore. And so, man, it's easy to take a kind of me first attitude. But are you still able to serve? Just think about this week, like what can you do to serve your community group? What can you do to serve the church that you are living life with and going through life with? Another one of the things that we talk about in the Turning Point is giving, and we have a very generous church, and we're so grateful for that. To see the financial giving has just been so amazing, even over these last few months during the pandemic. And that is because all of us, we believe that our generosity and the way that we give can help other people find life. And we really want to do this. And so it's really cool because now the staff of the Turning Point and our financial advisory committee, we're all kind of like, okay, we're going to have to start thinking differently now about the ways that we can invest the donations, the gifts that people give to the church, because our expenses are very different now than they were 6 months ago. And so, man, there's so many more opportunities for us to give and to be able to bring the love of Jesus into the world in a very different way now. And so we're really excited about that. So thank you for continuing to give, to help support the Turning Point Church, to help support the church in El Salvador, to help support Hope Worldwide. Your generosity is amazing, and God blesses that. You do reap what you sow. And, so when we continue to sow generously, God will bless us so that we can be even more generous and help more people in need, which is a great thing. And then we talk about sharing. You know, we want to love, we want to serve, we want to give, and we want to share. We want to be able to help other people find what we have. Now, this also looks different when we are in a pandemic because we're not inviting somebody to come to our midweek service or come to our Sunday service. We're inviting them, hey, why don't you come join me on a Zoom call? And everybody's tired of Zoom calls, but then at the same time, we have something great to offer them, and there is hope. And during this series, we're really trying to make this something that will appeal to people who are looking for answers right now. So this is something that I want to encourage you to invite your friends to come and listen to this series, because we really want we want to be able to bring a great message of hope to all of us. So the series that we're in is called The Love You Give, inspired by the title of the film, The Hate You Give. And it is so easy for us to think that sometimes the opposite of love is hate, and that we either love something or we hate something, and that those are the two opposites there. But really, I think, and I wanted to suggest that we think about this today, that the opposite of love is actually fear. And that fear is what keeps us from being able to love. Fear is what brings about hate. Fear is what sparks anger. fear is where disappointment or hurt will come from, and there's always a fear that is attached to it. And so it's so good for us to be able to look at fear. I know Kevin talked about fear a couple weeks ago, and it's so helpful for us to think about. I want us to think about it a little bit deeper today, just in terms of how it affects our ability to love and how we can choose to lean into God so that he can help us deal with our fear. All through the scriptures, God says, do not be afraid, do not be afraid, do not be afraid. And, when God has to say something so many times, it's probably because he knows that we need to hear it time and time again. So God is always calling us to not be afraid and to put our trust in him, which is, man, that's a difficult thing to do. And, there's so many stories, even of the disciples having a difficult time putting their trust in Jesus and not being afraid. There's when Jesus found out that John the Baptist, his cousin, had been killed by Herod, he was trying to figure out, how do I process this? And he and his disciples got in a boat and they went to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. He was like, I just need to get away. But then he gets out of the boat and all these people, thousands of people, ran around the lake and they're meeting him, waiting for him on the other side. And so he talks to them, he feeds them. It's the feeding of the 5,000, and then he sends everybody away. He puts his disciples back in the boat and says, you guys just go on back. I need some alone time with God. So he spends the night up on the mountain praying to God, and then he starts walking across the water because, if your boat has gone on ahead of you, then that's the simplest thing. It makes the most sense as the Son of God that you would just walk across the lake to get to where you need to go, right? So Jesus is trucking across the lake, and the disciples are in the boat, and they're trying to get across, and then here comes this dude walking on the water, and they're freaking out. Like, what is it? Oh my gosh, what's going on? And then Jesus says, hey, it's me. Don't worry about it. It's me. And Peter goes, oh man, okay, I want to do that. Can you imagine being Peter? I would love to have been Peter in that moment. Like, everyone's freaking out and afraid, but Peter's like, well, no, wait a second. If that's Jesus, if he can walk on water, then we can walk on water, right? And he's like, Jesus, tell me to come to you. I want to walk on water. And Jesus is like, all right, let's do this. So Peter hops out of the boat and he starts walking on water, and he is walking across the lake to Jesus. How cool would that be? And he's having this moment of incredible victory and incredible faith in this thing that has never happened to him, I'm sure, before in his life, right? And so can you just imagine what was going through his head? Like, there's Jesus, and he told me to come, and I'm walking to him on the water, and this is absolutely incredible. And so in Matthew chapter 14, I want to show you what happens then, because this is really interesting. Matthew 14, verse 30, it says, but when he saw, it's talking about Peter, when he saw the strong wind and the waves, he was terrified and began to sink. Save me, Lord, he shouted. Now, think about this for a second. When he saw the wind, when he saw the strong wind, how do you see strong wind? Wind is not something that you can see. Now, you can see the effects of it. You can see where it goes. But I often think about that Peter was looking at the wind. There's all this stuff going on. He took his eyes off of Jesus. He took his eyes off of the one who said, I will be with you, come to me. He took his eyes off of that and he started seeing the effects of the wind all around him. Even though he had already overcome it, he was walking on the water. But the sight of the wind and the waves terrified him, and he began to sink. Isn't that what happens to us so many times? That God has said, just trust me and I will help you. Love this person. You're going to be okay. Have this conversation, you can make it. And we're like, okay, I'm going to trust in God. And then we start to see the effects of sin around us. We start to see the ripple effects of the problems in our society or in our church or in our home. And we're like, I don't know if this is going to work. I don't know if this is going to handle it. Or I don't know if I can handle it. I don't know if I can make it through this. And what do we then say when we're like, I don't think I can make it through this? Then you know what? I'm not sure that I really believe in God anymore. I'm not sure that I'm going to do things the way that he says. I'm going to do things the way that I think and the way that I think it needs to go, because we put our focus on the wind instead of entrusting in God who can really help us through. So what happens in this moment? Peter's starting to sink right then. It says Jesus immediately reached out and grabbed him. You have so little faith, Jesus said. Why did you doubt me? And man, what a horrible thing to have recorded about Jesus saying that to you. You have so little faith. Peter's like, dude, I just got out and walked on the water, really? But he started to sink because he saw the wind and the waves. Now, why did you doubt? But then here's something that I saw that I don't know that I've ever seen before or ever really thought about before. But the next verse says, when they climbed back into the boat, the wind stopped. The wind didn't stop until they climbed back in the boat. They were out there in the water. Peter was sinking. Jesus grabs him, pulls him back up on the water. That means the wind is still going. The wind is still going. It's crazy. The waves are still there. Everything is there. It's not until they walk back to the boat and then step in that the wind stops. Now, why is this significant? I mean, everything that is in the scriptures is significant, and we're supposed to dig into this for a reason. The thing that really got me as I was thinking about this is that sometimes I will be like, God, I don't know if I can make it. I'm starting to sink. You got to help me. And I believe that God is saying, listen, sometimes I'm going to help you get back to the boat, but the wind isn't going to stop yet for a while. It's going to take a minute because you're going to have to work all the way through this wind and all the way through this situation. I may not calm the storm exactly when you want me to calm the storm. You may feel like that you're sinking even though I've got you. I'm holding on to you. You're not going to sink, but the storm is still going to rage around you. And will you still put your trust in me? And then at some point, we're going to get back to the boat. We're going to step into the boat. Then the wind is going to stop and calm down. But until the wind calms down, I still want you to choose to trust me. And see, when we have this fear that this is not going to work, I don't know that I can do this. And some of us have had some pretty intense conversations as of late. And when you're on opposite sides of an issue with somebody and you're worried, I don't know that I can keep going and having this relationship with somebody. And a fear comes up, I don't think that I can do it. Jesus is saying, listen, it's going to be a little bit rough right now, but I've got you. You can still choose to love, and I've got you. You can still choose to love. You're going to make it through this because I've got you. The wind is still going on around us. We still may have some conflict that we're dealing with in our church, but I've got you, and it's going to be okay. At some point, we'll get back in the boat, and the wind will calm down. But until that time, you still choose to trust, and you still choose to love. There's another story earlier in Matthew chapter 8 where, again, they're back out on the lake, and Jesus is wiped out. He's asleep in the boat. He's totally knocked out. And it says in Matthew chapter 8, suddenly a fierce storm struck the lake with waves breaking into the boat, but Jesus was sleeping. And the disciples went and woke him up shouting, Lord, save us! We're going to drown! And Jesus replies, why are you afraid? You have so little faith. And then he got up and he rebuked the wind and the waves, and suddenly there was great calm. Did you see that? He rebuked the wind and the waves. So these things that cause us to fear, Jesus has the power to rebuke them. Jesus can calm the storms around us. The disciples were amazed. Who is this man, they asked. Even the wind and the waves obey him. See, this is the God that we serve. He can calm the wind and the waves. Sometimes, though, he won't. Sometimes the wind and the waves are going to keep going. He has the power to. But sometimes he won't until we get back in the boat, and we don't understand why he makes the choices that he does in those moments. But we can still believe that God is powerful and that God is sovereign. And if there are wind and waves going on around us, it's because God has us. He's not going to let us go. He just has not chosen to calm the wind and the waves yet. And when we decide to put our trust in him and we put our faith in him, knowing that he can calm the wind and the waves when he wants to, then it allows us to take a breath and to exhale and to allow the wind and the waves to swirl around us. But we are grounded in his power and in his love. And when we are grounded in his power and his love, then we can choose to love. And this is what God is calling us to, is to choose to love even if the wind and the waves are going on around us. I wanted to encourage you to read this psalm with me and just think about it and meditate it. It's out of the Voice translation, which I love. It's got some really different ways of thinking about different phrases and things like this. So in Psalm 46, I want to read this to you, but I want you first to start to think about what is it that you are afraid of right now? What fear is driving you right now? With the wind and the waves that are going on all around you, what are you really afraid of? I'm afraid that people aren't going to get it. I'm afraid that I might lose some friendships. I'm afraid that what I've always thought may not be true anymore. I'm afraid that I've been taught some things that aren't right and that maybe I don't know how to interact with people around me properly. I'm afraid that God is not going to be able to fix this. I'm afraid that I might say something that's going to hurt somebody deeply. Like, what is it that you are afraid of right now? And I want you to identify that fear. I want you to bring it out. I want you to think about it. And as I read through this psalm, I want you to take these words and allow them to draw you into God and into His love that will help us to be able to deal with the fear that we have. Psalm 46, verse 1, God is our shelter and our strength. When trouble seems near, God is nearer, and He's ready to help. So why run and hide? No fear, no pacing, no biting fingernails. When the earth spins out of control, we are sure and fearless. When mountains crumble and the waters run wild, we are sure and fearless. Even in heavy winds and huge waves, or as mountains shake, we are sure and fearless. I've been meditating on this passage and trying to get to that place where I feel like I am sure and fearless. And I can only do it if I acknowledge the fear that I have and bring it back to God. Psalm 46, it starts with God is our shelter and our strength. When trouble seems near, God is near. That's the thing that helps me to deal with my fear. As I'm interacting with people and it's difficult for me to love, what helps me? To know that when trouble is near, God is nearer. And I can rest in God's love, which helps me to deal with my fear, which helps me then choose how to love the people around me. In a few moments, we're going to have Devon and Shelley Smith share some thoughts that they have about the cross and just about dealing with fear and trusting in God and how the cross has really helped them to do that. And we'll share our communion meal together. But first, I wanted us to really take in this song. Now, we just did it 2 weeks ago, but I felt like I really wanted you to hear it again today because I want you to hear it in the context of this message. That Jesus is saying, come to me because I'm all that you need. I will take care of you. He's saying, I am the Lord your God. I go before you. And so as we listen to this song, take in these promises from God. Let it address your fear. And then move forward into your relationships, into your community groups, into your church, and into the world around you, choosing love. Let's listen to this together.